Hey guys, my name is Haley and today we're going to be filming my favorite books of the year of 2024 so far. Doing yet another video that I've never done before on my channel because I hate having to pick my favorites only halfway through the year because I have a feeling I'm going to have a lot more. But considering I already have so many favorites, I feel like the end of the year is just going to be worse of me trying to pick favorites. So there's no winning here. Full disclaimer, the top five, the last five of these are not ranked because I refuse. The last couple are mostly ranked. The first four or five I'm talking about are mostly ranked in order, but above that, no idea. I refuse to pick an actual favorite. I'm obsessed with all of them. One of my first favorites of the year that I'm going to talk about is All Our Hidden Gifts by Caroline O'Donoghue. This really took me by surprise. This was randomly really cheap on Amazon one day. And it looks like a tarot card and it's about tarot. So I was like, I need that. If you can't tell by the tarot earrings. It's about this girl at a boarding school. She goes there and starts reading tarot for people. And then one of her friends keeps finding a tarot card that shouldn't exist. So there's a whole mystery involving that. This has quite witchy, Catholic girl witchy vibes. I really enjoyed this. I'm sad that I haven't read or gotten to the rest of the series. I really need to get on that because I read this quite a while ago and I read it in one sitting, so I'm probably going to have to reread it to finish off the trilogy. But I really enjoyed this and it has remained on my list of favorites for the year for months now. Next up, we have a romance, which is Truly Madly Deeply by Alexandra Bellafleur. This took me quite by surprise. I started tabbing it. One of the first books I had tabbed in quite a while, and what really got me is that both of the leads in this are bisexual. And that was some fantastic representation for me. I don't know that I have ever read that rep specifically. I remember really, really loving one of the characters' parents in this. They were big theater people and they did this thing where they would talk in just theater sentences, names of shows. And it was just the cutest little quirkiest thing I've ever seen. But I mainly loved this for the representation and the romance was really, really cute. It's probably one of my favorite romance, just contemporary romances of the year. I really enjoyed it. And I just loved their falling in love because it was a friends to lovers thing, which is not usually my favorite, but I really enjoyed this one. Next up is a book that made me sob my eyeballs out, which I feel like I've talked about several times now. Maybe it's just because I'm pre-filming, but that is Stay Gold by Toby McSmith. This is about a trans boy who is going to a new school and he doesn't want anybody to know that he's trans because he doesn't want to deal with the repercussions that could come with that. As I've said several times, I thought this was going to be just a cute little romantic contemporary. And there are so many trigger warnings for homophobia and violence against queer people because the last 40 pages of this made me sob my eyes out. And I was not prepared and I was a mess for hours afterwards. So it has definitely, just for the fact of how hard it made me cry, made its way onto this list. Next up is a horror book, which I feel like I haven't talked about horror books in a while, and that is Mary by Nat Cassidy. This is a horror book about an old woman who starts to hit menopause and starts seeing these weird, really scary creatures around her, and she thinks she's going crazy. There's also a cult aspect to this towards the end of it. It takes place out in the desert. It just has really, really eerie vibes. And the pacing of this horror novel was perfect. I'm so excited to read Nat Cassidy's other book because the pacing was what really sold me on this. I accidentally read it in one sitting, maybe two sittings. I think I got up to eat once, and other than that, I just sat and read this book, even though I only intended to read a chapter or two of it because I had just finished another book and I stayed up half the night finishing this. It's so creepy. The creatures are so interesting. The main character wasn't predictable, and the ending also wasn't predictable, which I very much appreciated. As someone who has read and seen a lot of horror, it's really hard to surprise me with horrors, and this one definitely did that. Next on my favorites of the year so far, as I've talked about many times now, is the Dead series by Vaughn Cassidy. This is a series, I feel like I've explained this so many times, but I'm also pre-filming, so I apologize that I feel like I'm repeating myself. This is a series about a mortician who goes out. He's an introvert. He doesn't like going out, but he goes out for drinks for his birthday with some of his coworkers. He chokes on an ice cube and technically dies for like a minute or two and then is brought back by the paramedics. And then he realizes the next day, as he is going in for work and working on a body, that he can see ghosts. And the ghost that he sees in his mortuary is the ghost of the deceased person he is currently doing an autopsy on. And she is a drag queen named Dusty, and he ends up helping Dusty solve her murder, which involves him going to this place called the Rainbow Room, which is where a lot of drag queens perform. And this entire series has become my obsession in the last month and shot its way up on my favorites of the year because I could not stop reading them until I ran out of them. And I just finished the other one like last night, and I'm so excited to read this author's other books because this is fantastic. The humor is fantastic, the queer joy, the queer found family, all of it is so good, and I cannot express to enough. If you need more queer paranormal books, please read this. Next up on the favorites of the year is the one that hit really close to home for me and made me sob my eyes out, is Gay the Pray Away by Natalie Naudus. This I got as an ARC. Like, I got an e-ARC of it a couple months before it came out. I think back in April. It came out in the beginning of June. And also in my last vlog, I believe, it was around the time of the eclipse was when I read it. I talked at length about this at the end of that vlog as well because I read it during it. This is about a girl who is in a very, very, very conservative white Christian community. What she starts to realize is probably a cult. And she goes to the library and she's trying to figure out her sexuality. And she has a librarian who helps her find queer books. And one of the books that she finds is at the library, and she ends up stealing the library and just lets her steal it because he realizes that her parents would never allow her to read this book, is One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston, which is one of my favorite queer books and was so cute that it was used in this. And the author has talked several times about that was also a queer awakening for her, and which is why she used it for her main character. And this book has so much religious trauma, and it is like a queer sapphic love story of this girl trying to break out of this cult and away from her super controlling family. And in the process of that, her having to lose her entire community, up to her church community, her best friend in there. She starts trying to have like really important conversations with people and they just shut her down. It's just too real of a story for me, and is very, very reminiscent of mine, even though I was not a teenager when I left the church. I was an adult. But it really brings home the feeling of having to lose your entire community just to be who you are and be yourself and be with the person that you love. I want to go buy like 15 copies of these and put them in all the little free libraries around here, especially because a lot of them are by churches, because I feel like it is such an important story for just like teenagers especially who don't realize that they're in a cult. Because I can think of so many people that I used to know from my old church that I would love to just have them read this. Even if it's not to like have their own queer awakening, not even for that reason, but for them to see an outside perspective of what their religion could be perceived as or is perceived as to other people. But this is a really, really cute love story with so much emotional religious trauma, and I will never stop recommending it. And the rest of these books I've talked nonstop about in all of the videos that I have recently filmed. So we're to the ones that I will not rank, but I have The Spirit Bares Its Teeth by Andrew Joseph White. He has become one of my favorite authors. This is about a trans boy who gets sent to a sanatorium, like finishing school, because his family wants him to be the perfect wife. This is like historical fiction. It is also paranormal. And it has this thing where they believe that women are being sort of hypnotized by this thing called the veil sickness. And it's why they are acting out and such and not wanting to be the perfect wives. There are a lot of paranormal things in here. There are a lot of ghosts. The queer found family in this is so heartwarming. I cried a lot during this just because of how hard. I can't imagine people back, if we think queer people nowadays have issues with being accepted, it was so much worse back then, and in some ways it was better, a lot of ways it was worse, especially for trans people. And this book really just touched my like little queer heart. And also, I love paranormal things. I've always loved paranormal and horror, and that blends those two things. This book blends those two things together so, so well. And I have already made several people read this, and they also had the same reaction I did of just sobbing their eyeballs out and loving the story. So I highly, highly recommend this. And I'm very excited for his new book that comes out this fall. Next up, we have The Invocations by Crystal Sutherland. This is a world where witches are... The way you get power or certain powers is getting tattoos on your arms, and there's someone going around killing witches, and we follow 3 main perspectives of people that start to work together to figure out who this entity or creature or person is that is killing witches. And I loved all 3 of our perspectives. One of them is an orphan and like a homeless girl who has just been shunned by society. Another one is the daughter of a billionaire where her family has just shunned her because she got into witchcraft and they don't want to talk about it. They also don't want to talk about her queerness. And then the other girl is trying to bring her sister back from the dead. And these 3 people are like a ragtag little group. There's romance going on in this as well. It's very paranormal. A lot of like disturbing body horror. So trigger warning for that if that is an issue for you. But I loved this story so much, and it made me want to rebuy, because I got rid of the copy I used to have of House of Hollow, which is this author's other book, because I love this so much. And I don't know if it was an outlier or if I just love Crystal Sutherland's books, but maybe I'll read House of Hollow and find out. Next up is a whole series, and that is the Nine Knits Moon series by Piper CJ. Piper has become one of my favorite authors as well. I feel like she does the queer fantasy the best that I have ever personally seen it. There's also so much religious trauma packed into this, which if you have seen several of the other books is obviously a big buzzword of mine and something I will always enjoy. But this is a sapphic fantasy about these 2 girls who grew up in an orphanage together, and then something happens when they hit their teenage years where one of them gets taken away and one of them runs away, and they are constantly trying to find their way back to each other. There's a lot of poly representation in this. There's a lot of queer representation in this. There's so much religious trauma talked about in this because the church is a big part of this world. And I just loved all of the commentary. I loved our cast of characters. I love all of the side romances. I loved seeing Nox and Amaris constantly trying to get back to each other throughout the series, even if it was so frustrating when they were this close and then something else would happen, because that's how fantasy series work. But I binge read this entire series right before the 4th book came out, and it was such a fun experience. I cannot even imagine people that waited years for these books to come out. Or I don't even think it's years. I think they came out relatively fast because Piper does try to get her books out quickly. But I'm so excited to read more of Piper's books. Her other book that just came out is up there, and she has another one coming out this year, so I'm hoping to get to that soon. And then last is the book that I feel like I will not shut up about, and that is Godly Heathens by H.E. Edgman. This is a series about a non-binary teen who lives in the South, who has a queer best friend who lives in New York City, and her goal is to eventually get out of this deep South town and go to New York City when she graduates. And she keeps having these dreams and visions, and they get more and more frequent when a new stranger comes to town and tries to tell her something that she doesn't believe at first. And I feel like that's the best I can explain it. This does involve gods, as you might imagine from the title. I will not tell you how, because the way it is revealed is perfect, but I loved this duology so much. It has one of my favorite side characters I have possibly ever read. And I loved our queer little band of characters and like the found family aspects, but also the refound family that I can't explain. But the world that this creates from that tiny little contemporary town. Normally when there's like I'm trying to figure out how to explain this. Normally when there is another world in a story, I want to learn more about the other world and I don't care about the contemporary town. I cared so much about the contemporary group of kids in this that I was shocked. And I was almost upset that this other world had opened up, because I was like, no, I actually care about like all of the kids that are in this town and everything. And it's so good. This edition is stunning. I cannot wait for H.E. Edgman to write another book because this duology has become my new obsession. Let's see if I can hold them up. Are my favorite books of the year so far. Let me know what your favorite book of the year so far has been. Thank you all for watching, and I will see all of you guys next time.